Well, I met this fella. Actually, I met this fella through Lou years ago. Actually, we were in a Disney movie together, believe it or not. It was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Lou, why don't you stand up? No, Lou, stand up. Ron, stand up.
It's home from Earth we go.
If you notice, we all have the same issue. We're a little short. So we met years ago. Ron is a construction lawyer. We became friends through Lou and also through a project. And we're both huge baseball fans and Red Sox fans, and he can explain how we really bonded over that. But Ron is probably the most well-known construction lawyer in the country. He represents subcontractors, general contractors, owners. Anything you want to know about your project, he can tell you about. He can read your contracts. When I first met him, I said, "Man, you're expensive." He said, "George, I'm not. I can read a contract in 10 minutes. Another lawyer is going to take 2 hours to read it, so I'm really pretty cheap." So he did convince me of that. He litigates cases. He gave me his bio, and it's 14 pages long. I'm not going to read it. But he's spoken at over 50 events. He's a member of the American Bar Association. He has recognition by throughout the country with all construction management organizations as well as law organizations. So here's my buddy, Ron Ciotti.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Great music, great music. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for coming back from lunch. I'm sure the weather outside helped me today. So I want to thank you very much. Try to put off that food coma for a few more minutes, and I'd appreciate it. Couldn't ask for a better introductory photo. I'm a huge Boston Red Sox fan. I apologize if anybody out there is Dodgers fans, Yankees fans, or whoever else. But it's been a great run to be a New England sports fan. And it was wonderful to actually live through it with George, who helped me get through the World Series by constantly texting me. And in fact, I had a flooring project in New York City that I was on my way to. And George actually, while I was in the cab, was texting me play-by-play during the World Series. So it was fabulous. As he already stated, I'm Ron Ciotti. The firm I am a partner of is Hinckley Allen in Boston. We actually have 6 offices. We're about 250 attorneys, and we have one of the largest construction groups in the entire country. I myself specifically do nothing but construction. I am right now presently in cases, litigation matters, unfortunately, in 16 different states, 4 different countries. And in flooring, I have a specific love and have been able to help some of you in this organization itself. And right now I am in flooring cases in 6 different states and with numerous, unfortunately, cases within those states ranging all the way from California to Boston. So as we go through this morning's presentation, I'm first going to tell you I'm Italian and I use my hands. Secondly, I walk. Keeps me as a moving target. Attorneys learn that. So you're going to have to follow me on the stage as I talk, but I apologize for that. But I also want one other thing. And it's a little difficult for me to see, just in case I miss you, wave your hand, and that is ask questions while I speak. Please don't wait till the end. It's always more helpful, it's always more interesting, so I ask that right off the bat. So as we go through it, please feel free to ask me questions about the presentation. All that being said, and I will tell you one other thing, and this is something Jeff and I just talked about. Whether you use me, my firm, or any other firm, your flooring contractors, do me one favor, and then I'll drop the whole attorney thing. Use a construction attorney when you need legal help. You wouldn't want if you needed somebody to do flooring, you wouldn't call some generalist who does a little bit of electrical work, a little bit of flooring work, a little bit of drywall. You would call a flooring contractor. Don't call a general attorney who does general litigation or who does everything when you need a construction attorney, when you yourself have a construction case and you need a construction attorney, or you need your contracts reviewed. Don't go to a general corporate lawyer, go to a construction attorney, because that's what's going to help you. He's going to notice things that other people don't. He's going to understand strategies that other people don't, and he's going to be able to do it at a much more efficient rate, as George just talked about. All that being said, that's not a commercial for me. There's plenty of other construction attorneys out there. Use a construction attorney. It's better for your organization. So I'm up here today to talk about material price escalation. And some of you, I'm sure, are going, seriously? I got to listen to an attorney talk about material price escalation? And, you know, I guess you'd be right, because material price escalation, it's just about prices going up, right? So, you know, we look at that, and that means what? Listen, the margins in this industry are massive, right? So you don't care about prices going up, costs, right? You don't care about that stuff. And everything in the world is calm. There's no trade wars or tariffs or natural disasters that might cause material price escalation, right? So what are we even talking about this for? Well, obviously I'm being massively facetious, and so facetious that I will tell you that next week I have been asked to speak at the Modular Building Institute's World of Modular event to discuss, guess what? Material price escalation. 2 weeks after that, the AGC of America has asked me to come in to their national convention and speak on material price escalation. 4 weeks after that, the Construction Owners Association of America has asked me to come to their spring leadership conference and speak on, guess what? Material price escalation. So if all of those organizations are looking at it and are concerned about it, you should be as well. So, what is material price escalation? Well, it's literally just the change in the cost and price of a specific good or a material during a specific time period in an economy, okay? And so most of you, I would assume, or I hope anyway, are saying, well, yeah, prices go up, no clue. But what we're really talking about, what we're really trying to drill down on, is those price escalations that you aren't anticipating, that are rapidly coming, that hit hard, that are escalated quickly, and are unanticipated, because those are the ones that kill you. And they can be caused by a number of things. They can be caused by tariffs, trade, they can be caused by taxes, regulations, natural disasters, lots of different things. But when they hit, if you don't have something that you've done to mitigate that risk, it can impact you substantially. So when you look at it, one of the issues is that for a lump sum contract, you are, guess what? Holding the bag. You've given a contract price. You've given a bid price. It's there. Now all of a sudden your material prices escalate wildly, and guess who's holding the bag if you haven't taken risk mitigation processes? So that's what we're here to talk about. And so to give you an example of that, one of the things I thought was most interesting was early in 2018, our president decided that he was going to levy down some tariffs. And I'm not here to make any political aspersions in any way. But he announced some tariffs that were coming down the line. And the big ones were 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum. And I know those probably don't impact you. But here's what I wanted to point out. Before those tariffs went into play, there was already a 10% increase in steel prices by March of 2018. Well before, months before they actually got implemented. Because what was happening is there was uncertainty surrounding the implementation of the tariffs, and people were scared of what the prices might do, and so they boomed up their prices immediately. And those that weren't prepared for it, those that hadn't mitigated their risk of a material price escalation, got stuck. Got stuck in a big way. So when we're looking at it, I just wanted to put up there a chart of what prices did between August of 2017 and August of 2018. And you'll see some pretty significant increases in certain items. But what I wanted to really point out is how things fluctuate from year to year and how those fluctuations can impact your company. One of the things I came across, though, while I was preparing for this, is something that is downright scary to me. From a business standpoint, guys, look at this. Material costs are rising faster than bid prices. That's a problem. That's a real concern that needs to be addressed in this industry, has for many years. We continue to see it happening. So how do we, or when do we, mitigate the risk of material price escalation? When we do it is very interesting. You can do it at a number of different times. You can do it during the bid process. You can do it during procurement. You can do it during contracting, which is, by the way, the easiest and best opportunity for it. And then, well, if you haven't done it any of those 3 times, you're in a difficult situation. But that's when you look back to the existing contract and you look back to see what clauses you might be able to contort in your favor. So, given all of that, we start with the time of the bid. At the time of the bid, you have to obviously do your cost estimates. Well, when you're doing your cost estimates, you need to use a price escalation. You need to account for price escalation using a cost index. You can use the BCI, the CCI, I'm sure you're aware of those, the Turner Cost Index. There's a number of them out there that you can use that will help in a small way take into account cost increases. They really don't help you, though, from the significant material price escalation, which is what we're talking about. And remember, obviously, that if you're working for a public entity, some public entities have their own cost indices. And if you're going to do that, make sure that you follow theirs, if they allow at all for any type of accountability for price increases. A lot of public entities do not. Additionally, and I think these are probably more important even than using the cost index, is to either A, lock in material prices early with your suppliers. How many suppliers are out here? Can you raise your hand? Okay, I just lost Christmas baskets from you, because I'm asking to have those prices locked in so that if there is a material price increase, you've really shifted the risk downstream to those suppliers. And I know that's not music to the suppliers' ears. I apologize. I'm up here talking to the contractors, so I apologize for that. You also can include in your bid a generous contingency to sort of cover for a material price escalation clause. Now listen, I'm not naive. Construction's all I do. So I understand when you put in a generous contingency in your bid, you are decreasing significantly the chance of getting that project. But you need to start weighing in your business sense as to whether or not it's worth it to pad that contingency so that you can insure against a potentially fatal, business fatal decision of a material price escalation that wasn't protected against. So that's the second way. The third way, I think, is actually the best, and it's the one that has me, I would say, most intrigued by, which is to shorten the duration of the validity of your bid. And what I mean by that, and why I'm so enthralled in this piece, is because right now, as you know, as I've told you already, I do work all across the country. And I do a lot of work for general contractors as well. And when I've been working with general contractors, I always ask them how business is. I'm always trying to figure out where the economy's going, what's happening. Well, the thing that I found out over the last 6 months, which was really troubling to me, is a phenomenon's going on right now that hasn't been this prevalent over the last decade, which is the starts of projects getting pushed. It always troubles me a bit, and that's what we're seeing a lot of right now. And it's across the country. It's not really localized to one geographic area. We're seeing a lot of projects the starting dates getting pushed. Haven't figured out why yet, because the banks are still loaning pretty well. I'm not up here to give an economic report, but that's one of the phenomenons we're seeing. And so when the starting date to projects are getting pushed, it's even more important to come back to this third component here of shortening the duration of your bids where they would be valid. Because you don't want to bid something today that is supposed to start this fall, only to find out it's not going till next summer. And now your bid is hanging out there for a year and a half or so, and you're hoping that nothing happens in the world to have one of those price escalations that we just talked about. By the way, some of you in this room, probably who watched the news yesterday, are saying, why are we even here talking about this? Didn't Ron watch the news last night or this morning? Because the U.S. actually just announced that they are postponing their increase in the tariffs on China. They were supposed to be increasing them from 10% to 25%. They're postponing that indefinitely because it looks like we are about to enter into a trade agreement with China. Now, so you're sitting here, well, then I should leave and head out to the rain outside. But maybe not, because what we have also announced is that we are scrapping the trade concessions that we were giving to India. We are breaking the trade link that we had with Turkey. And as you probably already know, that the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement, we pulled out of that previously. And we've also put pressures on Germany and South Korea and the European Union as far as different trade agreements. And so right now, I don't care what's happening with China. Right now, there is so much uncertainty in the trade world that material prices are as volatile as they've ever been. So shortening your time duration of having a bid hanging out there is a real critical component to mitigating your risk of price escalation. So now we really get to the procurement phase. I know it says time of bid up there, so ignore that. It really should be the procurement phase of purchasing the most volatile material, the most price volatile materials early. Now, obviously, if you're going to do that, you need to have complete designs that are complete and reliable. And really, the only way you're going to know that and you're going to have confidence in that is if you're involved in somewhat of a collaborative process. It doesn't have to be a full IPD process. It doesn't even have to be a highly collaborative process. But it really works best if you are somehow involved in some way in that collaborative design process, because then you're going to have that confidence that comes with it, that you know that those designs are complete and reliable at an early stage. If you don't, then you're really taking a risk because of the next bullet you see there of considering the impact of any potential design changes. If you're going to start purchasing at a very early stage and those designs weren't complete yet and there is a change in the designs, then you're really in trouble. So make sure that they are complete and reliable if you're going to use this. Also remember to account for in your bid, if you are planning to do an early purchase, remember to plan in your bid for increased storage and handling costs if you're going to be holding these for a while. So also in the procurement stage, where's the suppliers again? You might want to limit the supplier's rights to those rights that you have with your upstream contractor. So if you're working for the owner or the GC and there is clauses in your contract related to material price escalations, let's pass those through to make sure that it's linked up properly with your supplier so that it moves again. I'm losing all of my Christmas baskets here, aren't I, from the suppliers in the room. I apologize, but trying to do this as fairly as possible, and that's a fair way to do it. Alternatively, limit the supplier's ability to raise the prices. Reach an agreement with the supplier. If they're going to look at you and say, hey, listen, we may need to increase those prices, well, at least let's put a cap on it so that we're sharing the risk of a material price escalation versus shifting it completely one way or the other. So again, that's during the procurement phase. Now we get to the contracting phase. Now, the contracting phase is the best opportunity you have to mitigate the risk of a material price escalation. So that's really where you want to be. So now you look at it and you say, well, in a typical lump sum contract, what happens? It's called the contractor gets screwed. That's what it's called. So in a lump sum contract, you have a lump sum, you've given the lump sum, the prices go up, and guess who gets stuck with it? You do, congratulations, that's a loss of a project. Why isn't it the owner? It's his project. The prices went up, that's not your fault. You didn't create the earthquake in Brazil. You didn't put the tariffs on the materials. Why is it your fault? It should be the owner's fault. They took the risk of building this building. But no, it's your fault under a typical lump sum contract. So that's why you want to modify it. That's why you want to add in one of these clauses. There's basically 3 clauses that we talk about. And they're really simple. And you don't even have to get out your pen and pencil because I've put sample clauses into the PowerPoint presentation. And Jeff has promised me the PowerPoint presentation will be sent to you guys at some point in time in the future before the next material price escalation. No, I'm just joking. I didn't. He did not guarantee that. But the first one we're talking about is called the Day 1 clause. Now, Day 1 clause is as simple as it gets. All the Day 1 clause says is that you, the party that I'm contracting with, whether it be a general contractor or an owner, you're going to be responsible from a point in time. In other words, normally it is at either the bid time or the contract time. Normally it's the contract time. From that point forward, if there's a material price escalation, you own it. It's as simple as that. What you will have to do within that clause is you will have to add in what materials are covered under it. And here's the one that might make you a little bit uncomfortable, is you're going to have to put the base price, the baseline price into that contract. So you have a material price escalation clause. It says, as of the date of the contract, any material price escalation is the upstream contract party. Here's the materials that are covered under it, and here's the baseline prices of them. This is what I'm paying for them. And so if they go above that, it's yours. That's all a Day 1 is. It's a very easy clause, it's a very simple clause, but it's also a clause that gets a lot of kickback from who? The party that's upstream. So yes.
How savvy are you seeing that GC is getting with the same language to their owners?
That's why I'm at the AGC National Convention in a couple of weeks. They are starting to use these with owners a lot. That's why the ownership group asked me to come, is to talk about these clauses that they're now seeing popping up in their contracts, and how to, because really what we're trying to get is a fair sharing of this risk. That's really what we're trying to get to. Frankly, it's wonderful if you can shift the risk completely, but that's not normally what's going to happen. That's why I started with the Day 1 clause. Complete shifting of the risk. It's all yours. Yes?
So is general contractors in favor of this clause?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Contractors love this clause. They just want to make sure that they get the clause all the way up. So if you're bringing it to them in a subcontract agreement, they're going to want to make sure that it's also included in the prime contract. Frankly, what we've done from a subcontracting standpoint, when we give the bid, we tell them ahead of time we want this clause in our contract so that you use it in your prime contract before you even sign it. So it's a good way to do it. General contractors love it, and because the general contractor is not getting stuck here. The general contractor is going to push it upstream to the owner, and which is really where it should lie if you're going to do a complete shift. Now, you don't have to do a complete shift. The second one is what's called a threshold clause. Threshold escalation clause is simply this. You pick a number that you can live with. Okay, you know what? This is my baseline price. It's X. I can be okay with a 5% increase in X. I'll live with that. It's going to hurt me. It's going to make this project not such a great project if it happens. But I'll live with that if I have to. But I'm not going to get killed by a 20% increase in the material price, which is going to just drown me. So what this says is that I will live with a material price escalation up to a certain percentage. It can be 1%, 2%, 3%, whatever it is of your pain level. And then from that point above, it's either the general contractor or owner, whoever you're contracting with. They take it from above that. So if you've agreed to 5% and it goes up by 20%, it booms, they take on that extra 15%. So that's what a threshold clause does. And this is a sample threshold clause. Again, I told you I have examples of each in there. One of the things I want to point out is within these clauses, within these samples, one of the things that you'll see, and I don't know how to go backwards, so I won't go back to the day one, but on the day one clause, one of the things that you will see in it that we've put in it is it includes taxes and surcharges. Now, the reason it includes thank you very much. Yeah, taxes and or surcharges. So the prices of materials, taxes and or surcharges. The reason that's in there is because one of the things we've hit in litigating one of these was the argument that wasn't an increase in the price. Those were additional taxes and surcharges that were put on that got increased, and so that's what increased the price. It didn't increase the price, it was just an overall cost that you're getting hit with, even though it was about I think at the time, about a 15% increase of the price. They said, no, that wasn't a price, it was an overall cost. And that was actually, the price stayed the same. It was all surcharges and tax. We won. It was still a price increase. But we said, we need to change the clause that we're recommending because of that. Let's make it clear that it's not just the price. It's any type of taxes and surcharges included in it. So that's why you see that in there. So another threshold clause is an example. So then there's also what's called a delay clause. Again, pretty darn simple. These clauses are not rocket science, but what they can save you is tremendous. Delay clause is all about timing. So you have a day one clause, which shifts the risk completely, a threshold clause that shares the risk, and now you have a delay clause, which is all about timing. And a delay clause, the timing of it can be in a number of different areas, a number of different time periods. You can include it you can say that the delay clause starts at the time of the bid. You can say it starts at the time of your initial start date. You can say at your completion date. What it's all about is the delay that takes place. If that date that you have chosen is delayed, if your start date is delayed, if your completion date is delayed, if your intended purchase of materials date that everybody agrees upon is delayed, once that delay occurs, the risk gets shifted to the party in which you're contracting with, the general contractor, the owner, whoever that party is. And so again, it's a shift of the risk, it's not a sharing of the risk. It's a shift of the risk once that delay clause kicks in. And here's another sample of it. Again, you don't have to try to remember these samples. You don't have to try to write them down. They're in the PowerPoint that Jeff is going to send you. So that's why I'm kind of buzzing right by them quickly. So you have these three different types of material price escalation clauses. But what about a reluctant contracting party, whether it's the GC or the owner? They don't want the risk shifted to them. Well, that's when you have to start thinking about, okay, well, the threshold clause was something to give them. Okay, we won't shift the risk, we'll share the risk. But what about sharing the reward? These are called bilateral agreements. You still use a day one or usually use a threshold, but you can use a delay clause in this. But they're bilateral agreements because now they're giving a little bit reward. And all that means, again, simple. If you're going to share in the pain with me, we're going to share in the reward with you. If the price drops, if we've picked, say, 5%, if it increases by more than 5%, you feel the pain. You take it from there. If the price drops by more than 5%, and you can agree with whatever percentages, if it drops by a percentage, you get the reward for that, the upstream contractor. So again, it's trying to give them something so that there is a sharing of the risk, but in that case, a sharing of the benefit as well. So it's a little bit more, again, it's a way to get that upstream party to agree to accept one of these provisions. And they can continue to get more and more complex because you can use a threshold and a delay clause at the same time with a bilateral agreement. So you really can start getting quite interesting.
Back to the delay clause.
Sure. Yeah.
A thought crossed my mind.
Sure.
Can you use that if a job gets delayed? You have calculated that delay puts more pressure because you have another job that's not related. Can you ask for more money because you're asking your crews to work overtime because the other job that's not related?
Sure, absolutely. The issue is how much is that upstream contractor or owner going to accept? You can craft these in a number of different ways. I've done some crazy things with these, but you can absolutely do that, and you can. I don't want to get too aside, but yes, you can do some fun things with them. I'd be happy to talk to you about some of the things that we've done with these. You'd be amazed. So in a mutually beneficial material escalation clause or a bilateral clause, that's all it is. It's the sharing of the risk and the reward so that to allow that upstream contractor to actually accept that clause. That's what you're trying to do there. So those are the types of contract clauses that you can put in to help mitigate your risk of material price escalation. But I talked about earlier, what if during the bid process, you didn't shorten the duration of your bid, you didn't put in a generous contingency, you didn't freeze the price with the supplier, you didn't do all the things we just talked about, and then in the procurement phase, you didn't pre-purchase things, you weren't able to shift the risk to the supplier, and you didn't do any of the contract clauses. And you now have a material price escalation while you're in the project. Honestly, you're in tough shape. You start picking apart the contract at the time. That's when you call, Ron, hello, I got a contract here. Can you look at and find a clause that this might fit under? And it's not easy. And so I will not tell you that this is the preferred method by any means. But what you can do is start looking at the contract and realizing that there are some standard contract provisions that might cover some things, like this. This is a change in law provision. A change in law provision are in most standard contracts. It's in consensus docs, some of the AIAs, EJCDCs, DBIAs. So it's in a lot of the standard contracts that you're working under. The change in law provisions are worded very differently in each. So I'm not saying it will cover your exact problem. But if it's, let's say, the consensus docs 200, by the way, I should admit this right up front, I am very biased. I am the incoming chair of the AGC of America's Contract Documents Forum. The AGC of America's Contract Documents Forum, it actually drafts consensus docs. How many of you have heard of consensus docs or used a consensus docs? All right, some, not enough. It's a great, fair family of documents. There's over 40 different organizations that are included in it. Every time we draft a document, every time a consensus docs document gets drafted, it has to go through these 40-plus organizations. There are owner organizations, contractor organizations, subcontractor organizations, design organizations, engineering organizations, owners organizations, and surety organizations, all within that 40. So everybody has to agree that this is a good contract, fair contract document. What it means is it's a very fair contract document, but it's still not one that you want to use off the shelf, because it's a completely fair, and you're going to want to twist it a little bit to favor yourself and protect yourself. It is a much more fair document and better document for you guys than an AIA any day. An AIA is an advocate's document written by an architectural group that wants to protect its members and does so very well. It is not out there to help contractors. Never make that mistake. So anyway, I am actually in charge of the entire Consensus Docs organization as the incoming chair. I've been the vice chair for the last 3 years for AGC of America. I'm now the chair for the next 3 years. But the Consensus Docs 200, Article 3.21.2, actually brings in this equitable adjustment for changes in law and taxes. And so if you have a material price escalation because of some massive tax put on this raw material, you might find relief under this provision that you might not have otherwise thought about. Again, really trying to figure out where are tariffs a tax? They can be argued as a tax. And so could I get you some relief under this provision from a material price escalation? Good chance. Don't know for sure, but it's a good argument. So it's an opportunity, and that's what I mean by these provisions. Force majeure. Did your material price escalation, was that a result of a natural disaster that limited or restricted the amount of available product, and so the prices boomed? If so, the force majeure would probably find you relief from that material price escalation, a reimbursement from that price escalation. Mutual mistake, commercial impracticability, all of these are contract provisions that you need to look at, and they're not limited to those. You need to look at if there's a material price escalation and you don't have any of the other material price escalation clauses in your contract, and you haven't done all those other things we talked about. But because of this speech today, you're all going to do those, right? You're never going to be in this situation. So anyway, I wanted to tell you, AIA does not have a material price escalation clause in the contract. Shocker. So if you're using an AIA document, there's nobody in here from AIA, right? Because nobody's thrown a tomato at me yet. They know me well. They don't love me. They don't send me love letters. But the AIA documents, don't have them in there. You're going to have to modify those documents to make sure you're protected properly. You should never be signing an AIA off-the-shelf document. They need heavy revisions if you're going to accept an AIA document. They are horrible for contractors. Consensus Docs 200.1 is actually a material price escalation clause addendum. It's a bilateral threshold clause, just so you know, whereby, what's a threshold clause? Set a limit of what your pain level is for a price increase, and then after that, it gets shifted to the other party, so it's a sharing of that price increase. That's what the 200.1 does. It gives you another page to list the materials that you're going to put under that, and it lists in a line for the baseline price for that, so you know exactly what that price increase was. So basically, it effectively provides you a cap from your risk. So that is my presentation on material price escalation clauses. I've got about 15 minutes under the time that Jeff gave me. I'm never giving up a stage if I have it. I'm an attorney, I love talking, but I want to open it up now to any questions, not even limited to material price escalation. You got an attorney on stage, fire away, it's free. Oh, wait a minute, I'll come right back to you.
One quick question. If the prime contractor had that in his contract to the owner and saying we didn't do any of those first three options,
Yeah.
would we not have the ability to go after that if he had it in the contract to the owner?
If the GC had put in his contract with the owner the shifting of that material price escalation?
Yeah, in general for all the
The answer is no. Just because the GC shifts it to the owner, if you haven't shifted it off of yours, the GC can still keep you on the hook for the price you gave on that project. So he won't be shifting it to the owner because there'll be nothing to shift, because it won't ever fall on his back, in other words, because you gave a price in your bid of X, and even though the materials went up 2X, your bid's still X to him. And so he's never going to feel a material price escalation that he would be able to pass on because it stops at you. That's why it's so important that you have it in your contract. Yes?
Hi, I have a very simple question. If AIA are so bad for the contractor, why are the contracts coming to us, AIA form?
Great question, great question. Okay, first off, AIA did an amazing thing years and years ago. And I'm talking generations ago. They created a construction form contract. For generations, it was the only construction form contract. So if a contractor was out there and didn't want to hire an attorney to go and draft a handmade contract, he was going to have to pull off an AIA. So that's all that was out there. But that's not really the way why it is now still. Why it is now, and this is the most difficult thing for contractors, who starts the contracting process when it's not an integrated project delivery project or a highly collaborative project or a design build project? Who starts the contracting process? Owner and architect. That's who starts it. Do you know what the owners do? Wait for the architect to give them a contract. You think the architect's pulling out something other than an AIA? It's their contract. They get to use the AIA contract. Of course, they'd be an idiot not to use it. So they give the owner an AIA contract. Guess what the owner does? The owner goes back to their real estate attorney, which is what usually the owners are using for their construction attorney. They go back to their real estate attorney. The real estate attorney's only heard of one thing because it's been around for generations. I got an AIA contract. Okay, got it in from the architect. Yeah, looks good. Here it is, owner. Okay, the owner then says, I'm entering into a contract with the GC. What do I need? Oh, I got one of those. It's an AIA GC, owner GC contract. There you go. Not a great contract. Frankly, it's not even a great contract for the owners. The real estate attorneys just don't know that yet. The fact of the matter, though, is the ones that get it the worst under an AIA contract are contractors. But that's why we see them all the time, constantly.
Change at all?
Do we see this is going to change at all?
Yeah.
Yes, only because of the different delivery methods that are coming in, like design build. It gives the contractor the opportunity to be in that front part of the contracting process. Highly collaborative work, IPD type work. Those all give the contractor the ability to get in there and kill an AIA contract before it gets started. Also, there is an educational process going on right now in the country. Consensus Docs has taken a significant bite out of AIA. And I will tell you that there is an educational process going on, even with real estate attorneys, et cetera, that I think is starting to happen. Is it going to happen overnight? No. You know, we're probably not going to be practicing when we finally see the AIA come back down to where they should be. The fact of the matter is, they have gotten in this. I will give you a quick short story. Look at my time here. The AIA updates their documents every 10 years. I was the president of our local AGC, at the time. I was the first attorney ever to be president of our local AGC. It was one of my most proud moments. Sorry about that. They came to me with the AIA had always received AGC's endorsement of their documents for all these generations. Why? I have no idea. It was some sort of business deal. But when they updated their document in 2007, their A201 general conditions, which is where the meat of the responsibilities and obligations are, my executive director came and handed it to me and said, Ron, would you look at this and give a presentation to the board? I said, sure. So I looked at it and went, oh my gosh, this is over the top. They have become arrogant about it, where they have pushed all of the obligations down to the contractors. There's no responsibility. The architect has all the rights, no responsibilities. It is amazing what they've done. They've become arrogant with their documents because they know everybody uses them. And so that's what I told my executive director. He said, what are we supposed to do? Because we vote on it and send it into AGC of America. I said, I can't recommend that we vote yes. And he said, seriously, we always endorse it. And I said, I know, and I'm saying we shouldn't. So we didn't. We went to AGC National Convention. Across the board, it was not endorsed. And this was individually amongst all of the different local chapters. Across the board, not endorsed. For the first time in history, in 2007, it wasn't endorsed. So in 2017, 10 years later, when they updated their document again, did they come back and make it less aggressive? No. AIA just said, we don't need your endorsement. Didn't even send it to AGC this time for its endorsement and got even more aggressive with it. And I think over time, it's going to affect him. It's going to really hurt him. But he's been waiting to ask a question, so I'll be with you in just 1 second. Go ahead.
When you have the
I'll just repeat it.
when you have the escalation clause, the threshold clause, it says 5% of your threshold. Is the contractor then only responsible for anything above that 5%, or to include it, encompassing anything and all below? You know what I'm saying? Like, if it's 8% cost increase, you're only, the contractor is suggesting as a dealer, we're going to only go for 5%. We'll bear that cost. If you have 3%, perhaps, is only your responsibility.
Yeah, let me repeat it, and you tell me if I've gotten the question correctly. What was asked is under the threshold clause is as a dealer, if you agree to say 5%, are you only responsible for, or is the contractor responsible for everything over that 5%, or does it include that 5%? No, it's everything over the 5%. So the dealer, if he's agreeing to accept a threshold clause that at 5%, you're feeling the first 5% of pain. If it only goes up to 5%, the contractor doesn't get any increase. But if it goes up 6%, you're taking on 5%, the contractor's taking on 1%. Yes. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, we had the mic back there. I'll get you in just a second.
I'll be quick too because you kind of covered most of it already. But
Sure.
I had a little optimism earlier. You were talking about meeting with a lot of the generals about their price escalations. But right now, what I'm seeing is actual escalation restrictions in the contracts that are coming to us. So I guess a lot of it compares to what they're doing with the owners versus what they send down to us. But there's not a lot of wiggle room.
I think that's what's happening right now. I can tell you that the GCs are not trying to go downstream with it. They already basically have you downstream. They want to go upstream with it because they know that's where it's fairest, that's where the money is, and that's where the money can come from. And so that's why, in fact, I'm not only talking to the AGC of America's National Convention, I did the same presentation at AGC's BuildCon in Washington, D.C. last year. They liked it so much they want me to do it at the National Convention. But it's because of the fact that they're trying to find ways to move it up to the owner. They're not really trying to go downstream with it. It doesn't make really good sense to do that. It's when you're seeing that happen is probably when they could not find an agreement with the owner, and they are now trying to protect themselves downstream, which is what you guys should be doing. That's truly what you guys should be doing. You guys should be trying to move it upstream. But as I told you, and the reason why I'm not receiving any Christmas baskets from the suppliers in this room is that if you can't, you need to do something to protect yourself, whether it's a sharing of the risk with the, with the suppliers, et cetera. You need to find some type of sharing method to protect yourself from an overall all-out material price escalation. Where was that next one?
Here we go.
Oh, right there.
Can you comment on delay? Let's say you mentioned the delay of schedule. So
Yeah.
that can impact how long we store materials for. The other thing that can happen in delay of schedule is job readiness. In other words, we're scheduled to come in, and even though we're on the schedule and the floors are open, the windows have not been put into the job yet. So, there's no HVAC on, so they're not ready. Okay, so we say, you're not ready, we can't, and then a few weeks later, they start compressing our schedule because they said, you held up the schedule, you held up our job schedule by not laying the carpet, even though they wouldn't sign off on the, go ahead and lay it, and, they wouldn't,
Yeah.
do any of that. And then you have the potential of stacking. Let's say you're doing different floors, and you had a schedule where you're going to do this floor, this floor, this floor, this floor, but they decide, because they're behind schedule, to put the 2 floors at the same time, which means you have to have twice as much manpower because of their schedule. So how would you recommend us to try to mitigate risk in those kind of conditions?
If your schedule is staggered, in other words, you're doing floors or you're doing separate buildings, separate units, you can stagger your delay clause in the same manner so that you may not get a material price escalation or need one on building A because you started, if you pick the start of the work as your delay, which is the most common. If that's the selection in your delay clause, the start of the work, and went off timely on building A, but on building B you were delayed. If you have a staggered delay clause, in other words, for those it's specified in it, building A has to be started by X, building B has to be started by X, building C, you use that right or incorporate the schedule right into your delay clause. And if there are delays in those start dates, you still get that material price escalation if one happened in between, if a material price escalation happened in between. The one thing I warn you, though, is the reason I don't love delay clauses is because of the fact that the same reason why anytime there's a delay on the project, what happens? Everybody says, oh, no, that was your fault. It was my fault. Nobody ever says, oh, it was all me. So there's always an argument about who caused the delay, and so the delay clauses are normally argued about. That's why I like either a day one or a threshold with a bilateral clause, but anyway.
Outside of this topic, can you kind of give us a general view of where you see most litigation going overall when you look at the whole industry? We probably got a good idea in here what we think, but I'm just what you're seeing in cases.
Sure, I'm not sure what you mean by that. It's such a broad question, but litigation is up, I will tell you that. It's not up, I don't think, because there is great animosity or conflict in the industry. I think it's up because of the fact that there's just so much work going on. The percentage of litigation versus amount of work always goes up at its highest in a bad economy. This is a good economy. So percentage-wise, litigation versus the amount of work probably is lower. It's just overall litigation is up because there's so much work going on. It just spins off a lot of work. I don't know if I answered your question in any way, but okay.
So from a practical standpoint, actually getting these clauses accepted, can you give us some advice? I mean, it's ironic hearing what you have to say about the AIA, because the AIA contracts are more favorable to me in my experience than anything that the GCs and CMs are having me sign.
We should talk.
And and I've only really pushed back substantially on one master subcontract with one GC who we do a lot of work with, and it was like a 4-month-long, very painful process. And they accepted maybe a third of my changes, and the rest of them they were kind of like, go take a flying leap, you know, and it's like, what can I do about it, you know? So there's this feeling of powerlessness, but any advice you have for actually getting this in place?
Yeah, I think that there is, and I negotiate contracts. If I said every day, I'd be exaggerating, but if I said probably 3 or 4 a week, I would not be. On behalf of clients, and a lot of times it is a subcontractor. I'm representing a subcontractor negotiating with a general contractor. It really depends. I mean, some general contractors are, you don't touch my contract. If you're going to touch my contract, we'll go get somebody else. Those are probably about 3%. I will tell you, the one thing that I see the most is subcontractors who say to me, I know this is a bad contract, Ron. I want you to look at it. Tell me what I can live with, because they're not, I mean, you know, what I can't live with, because they're not going to change it. And what we find out is they're fine changing it. Because basically what most general contractors want, they're coming to you because you're a reputable subcontractor. They are not going to want to go out there and get a fly-by-night just because they'll agree to some crazy terms in their contract. So as long as you're explaining to them, and this is what I do when I talk to them about it, of why we're trying to get to a fair contract, why the provision that they asked for, why I've revised it in the way, I always give them a revision. The last thing in the world you want to do is say, I won't agree to that. That gives them nothing. Always tell them what you can live with, how you want it changed, how that provision, if we can change it this way, we could live with this, because this is why it makes it fair, why we're trying to, you know, create a fair document here. Because frankly, what I also explain to them is, you don't want something that's going to put my client under. Why do you want a contract that's going to put my client under? Guess what that's going to do to your project? You're the GC. Congratulations. You just bought yourself all sorts of LDs and whatever other delay damages they can get. You don't want to put us under. We're trying to work together. We're trying to work as a team. Here's what we can live with. A big part of negotiating terms in a contract is give them what you can live with. Make the revisions before you go back to them. Don't just send them back a contract that has red X's through a bunch of provisions. Gives them nothing to work with. When I'm representing a GC in a contract negotiation, the last thing I want to see doesn't give me anything to work with. I tell them, go pound sand, because you haven't given me anything to work with. If you're telling me we're not going to use the provision, I'm done. So anyway, I see Jeff is standing up. I see my time here. They have the big red numbers for those of you who haven't been So I want to thank everybody so much. I really appreciate your time. I'm going to be here for a while, so tonight, just come up and talk to me, ask me questions. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
That was awesome.
Thank you so much.
Jeff.
Appreciate it.